And in my community of Highland Park in Los Angeles, the gang culture was very, very strong. It started on Avenue 43. That's why the gang is called the Avenues. It goes from Avenue 20 all the way up to Avenue 66. I was born in Chinatown and moved up to Avenue 61, and then later on up to Avenue 66 up the top. But then later on, after high school, I moved down to Avenue 43, the homeland of the Avenues. But we all knew about the gangs and all that because we all went to school together. On one side of me were Latino surfers, the other side Latino gang members, and I was a Latino hippie. That was the scene that was going on at that time. We all dated similar girls. We all had low riders or hot rod, cars. We all had this kind of mix, Surfers would have gangster tattoos. Gangsters would have convertibles, which was the beach culture. Snoop Dogg, a black rapper, lives in LA, has a lowrider convertible with the surf culture. Tattooed by Mr. Cartoon, who was a graffiti writer. So in Los Angeles, there in the West Coast, we all kind of blend in, is together. So this graffiti culture that we have has always existed. When we were young, we used to skate. In the early 60s. We used to make our skateboards out of a piece of wood and then take metal skates, take them apart and hammer them with roofing nails because they're real big heads and real short, and you could hammer them in without going and putting spikes through your feet. But we came from a patin culture, a scooter culture. Los Angeles has a lot of hills. Latinos live back in the hills, El Sereno, Highland Park, all those, Echo Park. All those are hills. So we used to go, we finally knocked down the front end of the scooter, and we would go down the hills, the asphalt streets, Superman style. And we would hit a rock and slide off, and we were all scabbed up. We had scabs in our eyes and our elbows and our faces. That was a lot of fun. We were, 8, 9, 10 years old. And then later on, we would go down to the beach, and we would see all these surfers. The surf culture hadn't even started yet. Surfers were old hippies with long hair, and nobody had respect for them. We had more respect for the Hells Angels because they were organized, they were styling, and they had cool jackets with logos. We thought that was kind of cool. And so we were the ones, have you ever seen the Dogtown Z-Boys movie, the original skaters down there? We were the kids who would throw rocks off the pier down at the surfers. Later on, I realized some of those kids, we were friends. And the Dogtown Z-Boys, they were surfers, but they used to wear cholo bandanas. And the logo, Dogtown, is a cholo, is a gangster, a East LA style of lettering. It just shows all the kind of blending of our traditions from a long time ago. And only recently, it's being discovered. Let me describe the early cholo style, the East LA style of graffiti that we called Old English. It's the most prestigious letters that I said. We only used the capital letters. It came from the race riots from the Zoot Suiters and the Navy there from 1943, which my mother experienced. My mother saw how the sailors came into the theaters, grabbed all the young men, Latino men, and took them out to the streets of Broadway, down the middle of downtown, ripped off their clothes and started a bonfire and burned all their clothes to embarrass them, because they felt that they weren't doing enough of their effort in the war effort. But if you realize the Latino community had supplied not only an extraordinary effort in World War II, but also were merited as one of the most decorated in that whole episode. But what it did organize the communities to form their own gangs, but also that's where the letters started. They said, okay, let's start writing our names on the walls, which kind of came from the Shoeshine Boys. There was a tradition before there from the 30s. Shoeshine Boys used to leave their tag there in the corner to protect their corner. They used to use the dabbers and leave their name. My dad was a Shoeshine Boy. And I asked some of these old suitors, Zoot Suiters, I said, hey, why did you, why they used Old English? And they told me why. And I said, but how did you use those balloons and everything else, all those outlines and all those other decorative signs, you know, those quotations, all that? He said, oh, that came from the comic books. That came from Superman and Batman, you know, boom, pow. So they were using the new technology, the new medium, the new designs, you know. Comic books were their computers. So they were being hip and cool. So that tradition was kind of coming out, so all those styles. The first time I saw graffiti, I was maybe, you know, young. 6, 7, 8 years old. And I loved it. I loved the style. Everyone loves their gangsters. We see all the gangsters, American Me, blood in, blood out. Somehow we love that styling. It's a violent culture, but we love that styling. We love that look. The Italians, they love their mafia. You know, their dons are well dressed and all that. We have so many mafia movies. The Italian mafia culture is so more American than Italian. The black culture, they love their pimp daddy cultures that came out of the 60s, out of this late after the civil rights movement. Let me say, around the time of the civil rights movement, when the movies Shaft and Superfly were coming out, that was the first time a black man could be powerful, could have his own identity, even though it was a gangster, even though maybe it was a negative image. The first time that you didn't have to be a good-looking black man to be on TV, that you could be the black culture and be proud and black. So I went to a Black Panther party one time, and I said, someone asked the question, what happens when the police hassle you? You know, how do you feel? They said, well, we get more black. You get more of who you are. So after the black civil rights movement, the Brown Berets happened. And then the brown civil rights movement through the farm workers, through Cesar Chavez was happening. That was my environment, you know, that was kind of going on when I was a teenager, you know, in high school. But let me go back just a little bit and say that the first times that I started seeing graffiti and was when I was a young kid. We used to hang out in the sewer system. The water run off of the streets and it would go down to these cement tunnels, only about 3-4 feet high, and it would go down into the riverbeds. We're all concreted out. The Los Angeles rivers are all concrete. So we would walk up in there about 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers, and then it would be all dark, and then the river, there was just little slimy, little green moss water flowing in there all the time. It was nice and cool during the summers. We used to go in there and wear about 3 or 4 pairs of Levi's and go with candles. And as we went in, then we would melt the bottom of the candle and stick them to the side of the concrete wall. Then go up these slopes and then go further back in there. Then we would get crazy and start running as fast as we could and hit the water and start spinning in the dark. And we see these little lights way off in the distance, and we go spinning backwards and flipping around in the slime. And we thought it was so much fun. We used to call it sewer sliding. But in doing that, we started seeing graffiti from the 1950s in there, 1960s. Graffiti was done with Zippo lighters, because Zippo lighters, we used to fill them up with kerosene. They leave a lot of smoke. And then with the smoke, there was all these smoke graffiti tags that they're there in the tunnels. That's one of the first times I was able to touch graffiti, and I wanted to do it. Later on, when I was about 18, 19, the civil rights movement and the Chicano movement, I needed to describe who I was. My graffiti describes my Americanism. I'm Chicano. I'm Mexican-American. My grandparents are Tijuana, so I have a lot of border. Tijuana is not Mexico. It's border culture. My grandfather was the head engineer of the Hipódromo, the racetrack. So I was raised a little kid. I spent many summers at the racetrack. My father was a gambler and party people. And so we used to bring this Tijuana culture, kind of Hollywood, rock and roll. And then when the Chicano movement hit, I said, who am I? What kind of American am I? So I started hearing they were tagging there in New York, but we already had a tagging tradition, so I wanted to make my own tag. So I combined the 3 parts of the culture at that time of who I was. I took the movies, Shaft and Superfly, that pimp daddy, because it was super cool. And I took that big fedora hat, and I took that big fur collar, that New York style.